All right, thanks, Joanna. Welcome to this public information session for the development of the City of Fitchburg's Falulah Baker Brook Watershed Flood Reduction Plan. This is a project being conducted by the city under a grant through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness, or MVP, grant program. My name is Nicholas Erickson. I'm Commissioner of Public Works for the City of Fitchburg. And with me here tonight are representatives from our engineering consultant, Weston & Sampson, and the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Next slide. So before we get started tonight, I'd like to go over a few administrative details. I'd like to remind everyone that this session is being recorded. We will stop for questions at the midway point of the presentation and at the end of the presentation. In the meantime, please feel free to raise your hand or type a question into the chat box, and we'll respond during one of these two breaks. And with that, let's get started. Next slide, please. So tonight we'll give you a brief background on the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. We'll discuss details of the project, how it came about, and how it fits into this grant program. Then we will go over our results that we've come to date, talk a little bit about some of the proposed solutions to flooding that we've come up with, and we'll provide plenty of opportunity for discussion and questions. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Hillary King, who is our Regional MVP Program Coordinator with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. She'll give a brief background on the MVP program and how this project fits in.
Is that my cue? Hi, everybody.
Hillary.
Thanks for being here. As Nick mentioned, I'm the Central Regional Coordinator for the MVP, or Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program, again, under the Commonwealth's Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, or EEA. So many acronyms at the state. But the MVP grant program came to be after Governor Baker signed an executive order, EO 569 in 2016, which established a plan to both reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase climate resilience for the state. And so when we talk about climate resilience with MVP, we're really looking at the ability of a community to address the needs of its built, social, and natural environment to anticipate, cope with, and rebound stronger from events and trends related to climate change hazards. The program's initial funding was codified in 2018 legislation, helping MVP to award $11 million annually to municipal resilience efforts. And additional funding was allocated as part of last year's 2021 climate change legislation. And last year we awarded over $20 million to municipalities for this work. So with this map here, it shows our current program status. We have two grant programs. The first is the community resilience building process, a planning program in which 95% of Massachusetts cities and towns have completed or are currently participating in. And the second grant, the action grant, has awarded over 200 action grants over the last 5 years and over $65 million. So the next slide we have, goes, kind of gives an overview of funding. The MVP program supports 9 core principles, which demonstrate best practices for climate adaptation and reflect MVP's project application scoring criteria. So with the planning grant, most communities are, all communities are eligible for their first round, and then they become MVP designated communities after they finish the planning process, and there's a application process for the action grants. So when our application reviewers are reviewing, they're looking for proactive, forward-thinking projects, those that are, innovative and can be shared with other communities across the state. Applications are also reviewed for, whether the project addresses a climate vulnerability, and uses climate change data and science to be proactive with solutions instead of reactive. Are there ways the project can work or share information across political borders and use collective knowledge across multiple sectors? Cross-sector collaboration and holistic approaches can help confront a variety of local issues at once. They want to know how might the project broadly benefit and make connections within the community in multiple ways, with a focus on our most vulnerable populations, especially those who are environmentally burdened in a flood area or with low air quality, people with below the poverty line, communities of color, and are nature-based solutions considered, as these are found to provide long-term, cost-effective approaches to solving problems, as we'll talk about tonight. And again, that holistic approach to the way we plan, design, and develop and interact with our environment is key for resilience. So with the next slide, thinking about those core principles, we accept applications annually for each of these 3 project types. MVP funding is tied to the state fiscal year, so projects are broken up into year-long phases. So usually an application will send us a request for, modeling, assessments and feasibility studies for specific adaptation strategies, developing or adopting planning documents and regulations that encourage climate change adaptation, things like education and campaigns or training workshops on topics related to climate change adaptation, social resilience, or anti-racism. And there's also design and planning and implementation, which are fairly self-explanatory. So with the last slide I have, hopefully this isn't the first time you've heard of MVP in Fitchburg. The city completed the planning process in spring of 2020. Fun fact, the last in-person workshop I was able to attend before the COVID-19 shutdown was in Fitchburg, and one of the first to hold virtual public listening sessions. But the planning process in Fitchburg resulted in a combined hazard mitigation and climate adaptation plan, which addresses both federal and state requirements for the city to be eligible for both FEMA and MVP grant funding. And they were given quite a large sum of funding for their planning process because there additionally was a preliminary vulnerability assessment and action plan for the Nashua River flood reduction system and some expanded outreach efforts, supplying a survey and translation services and creating partnerships with city council and community-based organizations. And I guess before I hand it over to Nick again, the main thing that came out of that planning process was flooding as the top hazard of concern, and addressing flooding along the John Fitch Highway was identified as a high priority. So in 2021 and then in 2022, fairly sizable grant awards were received for continuing this work and providing the modeling that Nick will go through next. So thanks.
All right. Thanks, Hillary. So as Hillary mentioned, this project was originally developed to address some flooding issues along John Fitch Highway. As you might be aware, John Fitch Highway was constructed during the 1950s and 1960s by redirecting Baker Brook around the Cinema World Plaza, as shown on your current screen, and filling in some of the adjacent low-lying wetland areas. And following construction of the roadway, commercial areas were developed along this stretch between Lunenburg Street and Summer Street. And today, this area serves as one of the main commercial corridors in the city. Over the past several years, what we've come to realize is that Baker Brook floods during large rain events. The stream channel, or the stream itself, essentially tries to follow its original alignment and floods both commercial properties adjacent to the roadway and John Fitch Highway itself. So the graphic that you see on your screen here shows the current alignment of the stream in dark blue and the original alignment of the stream and its adjacent wetland areas in light blue. And I'm sure that anyone on this call today that's from Fitchburg has experienced some flooding on John Fitch Highway at least once in their lifetime. Next slide, please. So as Hillary mentioned, in 2021, the city received an MVP action grant to begin quantifying some of the flooding along John Fitch Highway between Lunenburg Street and Summer Street. And as part of this grant, we also completed the 25% design of various stormwater and green infrastructure improvements to try to help address some of this flooding, and also provide various roadway and pedestrian access improvements. What we were able to accomplish with this grant project is the 25% design of these improvements to this stretch of John Fitch Highway. And once that design was completed, we submitted it to Mass DOT's Transportation Improvement Program, and it was accepted by Mass DOT for inclusion in that program. And what that means is that if the city is able to fund the 25% through 100% design, we'll be eligible for construction funding from the state, which is excellent because the cost estimate for this work is anywhere between $5 and $10 million. Certainly something that's out of the current budgetary constraints of the city. So it's very helpful to be eligible for funding underneath that program. And most recently, the city has received funding through the American Rescue Plan Act to conduct that 25% to 100% design. So we're on track right now to submit this project to DOT and continue along the process under Mass DOT's Transportation Improvement Program to get that construction funding. So one of the major takeaways from this first phase of the work in the Baker Brook watershed was that if we were to reduce the amount of impervious cover in the watershed upstream of John Fitch Highway by 50%, we significantly reduced the flooding downstream on John Fitch Highway. And that's kind of what led us here to this project that we're talking about tonight. Next slide. So for this project, we're focusing on the watershed upstream of John Fitch Highway. And specifically, we're looking for ways to improve climate resiliency in the watershed by quantifying the flood reduction needs in the watershed, trying to identify ways to reduce impervious surfaces in the watershed and increase green space, and ultimately develop a long-term strategy to implement the identified flood control strategies. So on the screen here, you can see John Fitch Highway circled in red down towards the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. And then upstream of that, you see the Falulah and Baker Brook watershed, and that's what's outlined in black. And you can see the stream network kind of spider webs throughout there. Next slide, please. So with that, I'd like to introduce our Weston and Sampson project team that's with us here tonight. We have Lindsay Adams, who's a resiliency engineer, John Frey, who's a landscape architect, and Joanna Nadeau, who's a resiliency planner. Weston and Sampson, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Nick. We are really excited to be here. We've been enjoying working with the city and getting to know some of you over the last couple of years in the John Fitch Highway project. We have a whole resiliency focus that we try to bring to make sure communities are prepared for the impacts of climate change. And happy to walk you through what we've done so far and what's coming up on this project. So we are going to present some information and then we're going to use Slido and have an interactive portion in the latter part of the hour. I would love for everyone that's on the call to go now and open a new browser window, either on your phone or just a different window than this screen, so you can keep hearing us here, and type in slido.com, SLIDO.com. At the top where you see a place to join, you're going to want to enter in the code BAKER, B-A-K-E-R. So go there now because we're going to test it out and we want to be able to hear from you as we go. So as you've heard, the city is undertaking this modeling and planning project to help address current flooding and heat issues and to prepare for the increase in major weather events that will affect the community. The data from the state and projections show that we've already seen an increase in extreme storms and heat waves. We've seen flooding and sort of the unsafe conditions that both of those cause. And as Nick just said, because this area is already somewhat prone to flooding, and then we've added on top of it these impervious surfaces like buildings and parking lots, it makes that more extreme. And so those areas can also be the hottest, making walking or being outside dangerous in heat waves. And some neighborhoods in particular are really suffering the impacts of that more than others. So I hope you made your way over to Slido because we're going to have our first question now. So go to slido.com, type in Baker, and the question for you all is, how have you experienced climate change in Fitchburg? What have you seen? Already seeing flooding. What else have you seen? More frequent, intense rainstorms. Right, right. So we've got those big storms and they're getting more frequent. Flooding on waterways. Yep, and rainfall. So flooding being the top, I mean, we're thinking about flooding a lot, obviously, with this project, but I'm curious to know if there's other ways you're seeing kind of changes in climate. The hotter days, yep. And there'll be an increase in the number of heat waves in the future as well as hotter days, so sort of the stretches of hot days. Right, drought, ice storms. Yeah, so you're seeing in a variety of ways. More extreme winters. And of course, when we get that snowfall and then it melts, we're back to the flooding again, right? Okay, thanks everyone. So given this current situation, and it's only going to get more extreme in the future, MVP through the state is supporting cities to make these improvements that will reduce heat and flooding and improve the environment and health and safety for the community. So this project is actually taking the modeling that we've done in the John Fitch Highway project on those topics and looking at the potential for green spaces and stormwater management improvements across the watershed that drains into Baker Brook. We're looking at public and private properties for opportunities and using that with information about the costs and benefits and the community's priorities to help the city build a long-term implementation plan. So we trying to get you oriented here, just that this is the watershed we're discussing today. So if you're familiar with downtown Fitchburg is about here and John Fitch Highway is here. And so we're looking sort of north and west of those spaces that drain down into the John Fitch Highway segment. Our overall approach is to start by assessing the watershed's existing conditions, then to identify possible solutions and model out what the benefits of installing some of those solutions on the landscape might look like, and then use some of that information along with your input to prioritize projects that the city could plan for in the future. To bring the community into this process, we've been doing several events, and one of them was a pop-up event in the fall. You may have seen us at the Trick or Treat, where we shared some information about the project and had an interactive demonstration on how stormwater moves through the landscape. We also distributed an online survey to collect input about areas of concern and priorities. And we have a project webpage set up where we continue to make updates as we go. So keep an eye on that if you haven't already been there. We're also reaching out to the high school. We'll be doing an event at Fitchburg High School for STEM students, allowing them to take part and give input into this project as well. For today's meeting, we're here to share a status update with you all on what we've found so far and to get your input. So I'm going to hand this off now to Lindsay and John to walk you through our technical findings.
Hey everyone, so I'm going to talk tonight about the existing conditions and the future flooding within the Baker-Falulah Brook watershed. And if you can go to the next slide, Joanna, thanks. So this past fall in September 2021, we conducted a field assessment along the stream. So it was a walking survey along the stream and watershed. And while we were doing that, we were looking for deficiencies within the brook. So our team walked the stream starting at Lunenburg Crossing, which is kind of the southernmost end that we were looking at. We carried around GPS devices and we documented debris buildup, sediment buildup, outfall locations, conditions of outfalls, bank erosion, overgrowth, retaining wall conditions, channel dimensions. So it was a lot of data that we gathered. So if you look at the map on the left, you can see the outline, the rectangle on there. And so that shows you the field exploration boundaries. So that was the section of the stream that we were walking along. And then over on the right side of the slide, it's zoomed in on that red area. And you can see all those little circles are the points that we collected on our GPS. And the next slide. So using that data, we created a hydrologic and hydraulic model, which is also known as an H&H model. So that was created for the entire watershed. So this type of model simulates rainfall runoff, and it's used to predict water levels and flooding extents during rain events. The model included details on the stream, on the floodplains. It also looked at existing stormwater infrastructure, so how that's impacting flooding. And it was used to identify flood-prone areas within the watershed. It really showed us how in future storm scenarios, how much worse the flooding is going to get. And so this image that we're looking at right now can kind of show you the output from the modeling. So the left side of the screen is just a blown out the entire watershed. And we zoomed in on a section on the right so that you can really see what's going on. So this is going to be for the 5-year storm. And the light blue like fill color on there is the 5-year, the baseline. That's kind of what we're seeing right now. So you can see where flooding will occur based on the model. And then the darker blue outline is going to be our 2070 5-year flood extents. So there's a few areas where you can see the dark blue is covering a much larger area than the light blue, especially up near the northern, yep, right in there where Joanna's mouse is. And so I'm going to hand it over to John now to talk about the watershed analysis that we did using this data that we gathered.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, so with the watershed analysis, we're looking for nature-based solutions that are mainly green infrastructure or projects that are looking to improve stormwater management within this watershed. But we also looked at other nature-based solutions such as increased tree canopy along roadways. So I'll get to that in terms of the benefits for urban heat island impacts. So when we were saying that we are looking for opportunities for green infrastructure, there's different solutions that we kind of we're thinking about, or these solutions are categorized, and these are some of the strategies listed that include things like bioswales, the potential for floodable parks or flooding certain portions of parks and open spaces, opportunities for plazas that could temporarily flood or hold water on the surface or even below. We looked at opportunities as well for pond restoration, for stream daylighting, street tree planting, permeable paving, underground storage, and although we didn't list specifically where we could have rain harvesting, we wanted to include that as kind of another opportunity that would help benefit stormwater management or increase stormwater management, and could be implemented at many different scales, including personal properties, collecting your own rainwater for reuse, or just to help benefit the impacts to the existing drainage system. And so we use these kind of overall green infrastructure types, which within themselves kind of have different processes like conveyance or detention or retention and infiltration. And we started to look for opportunities within the watershed. So next slide, please. So the process for identifying is a desktop analysis that's part suitability study. So looking at, GIS data or digital data from the town that includes the street right-of-ways, open space, potential land ownership. So what's public versus private property. we combine that with the analysis, the H&H analysis that Lindsay just mentioned. So we look for opportunities that might benefit, that are close to the existing water system, that, for example, open spaces near a stream that might help serve as potential or temporary storage. But we also look for large impervious areas like parking lots within the watershed that have the potential to be converted to, reduce impervious surfaces within the watershed, but also to include some other benefits such as increased tree planting and infiltration. So we had identified a total of 34 projects within the study area, and we ended up grouping those 34 projects into 10 different scenarios. And so the scenarios is how we'll kind of discuss these projects. The scenario, we modeled the projects based on these 10 scenarios as well. So as we move forward, there's rankings in terms of the performance, and it's based on these scenarios. The scenarios themselves are projects that are grouped together in terms of proximity, but also when we move into some of the areas that have lots of projects, they are grouped in terms of kind of ownership as well. So next slide, please. So these are the 10 scenarios that we have. They include Coolidge Park, Crocker Elementary, Elliott Field, Fitchburg High School, the Wallace Civic Center, the Lutheran Church on John Fitch Highway, the intersection near John Fitch Highway and Fisher, and then the MA2A block, which is on John Fitch Highway, which is a large parking lot, the Saima Park, and Pearl Street, John Fitch Highway intersection, just at the southern edge of Coolidge Park. So each of these scenarios, we've broken it down, and they're color-coded projects within each scenario. So they kind of represent what the function of those projects are, whether it's bioretention, detention, or underground storage, or floodable field, going back to those kind of solutions that we had initially identified. So next slide, please. So we've taken those 10 scenarios and incorporated them into the H&H model. And so the output of all those models, we have different rankings, including significant, moderate, or minimal kind of impacts in terms of how each of these projects start to improve or actually reduce flooding volume. You can stay on that for a second.
Sorry.
So we've, no problem. So we've actually called out those top, I think there are 11 projects there, but the top 11 projects that kind of represent significant stormwater benefits, just to show you where they are within the watershed, but also to kind of illustrate the point that it's not that all the big projects are the best projects. It's kind of a mix and match depending on where they are within the watershed, the kind of surrounding context and conditions, and how easily they actually intercept and maybe collect stormwater and keep it from entering the stormwater system. So these, as we move forward, it's important to kind of understand that these represent this maybe significant flood reduction projects, but they might also not represent the best projects we want to carry forward. So in addition to all of the stormwater modeling or stormwater focused nature-based solutions, you go to the next slide, we also included some scenarios for urban heat improvements. So in order to kind of understand what our baseline conditions for heat are within Fitchburg, we started at the citywide scale modeling 3 different days that represent a 90-degree day, 95-degree day, and a 100-degree day. These represent kind of important metrics in terms of the temperatures themselves, because as we move forward in time, we'll have, instead of having 30 days, during the summer that are above 90 degrees, we might have 100 30 days that are above 100 degrees. So we're starting to feel the effects of longer, hotter summers. And on average, what might have been 90 degrees is more kind of like 100-degree day. And the other kind of important thing to draw from these maps is that you see hotter temperatures are experienced. These represent ambient air temperature. So that's kind of the temperature that you feel on ground level on the sidewalk as you're walking through. So you can see that most of the urban nodes or developed areas are hotter. And so we wanted to find opportunities that we could, in these kind of dense areas, to actually improve heat, specifically within the watershed. So one of those scenarios, if you go to the next slide, is to show the projects around the Wallace Civic Center and Coolidge Park, if they're implemented. So we have the existing condition for heat mapping on the left, and a proposed condition. So if we were to build all of these projects, what would that do in terms of improving or reducing the temperature that's felt? And so in many instances, you can actually see, for example, the Coolidge Park, you go from kind of an orange color to a yellow color, and that's kind of representing a 4-degree shift in temperature experience at the site. And so after doing the UHI mapping and modeling, we found that, you know, for every kind of 1,000 square, for every 10% increase in canopy, we can achieve kind of a 4-degree temperature benefit. And the same goes for imperviousness. If we kind of increase the permeable percentage of permeable surfaces within an area, then we can also see a reduction in heat. So the benefits of these types of projects, the co-benefits of stormwater projects, can also benefit our experience of heat. And we also modeled another project, I think, which may or may not be on the slide, but that was to propose planting or increased canopy, kind of following the same modeling or the same kind of project as the John Fitch Highway around Cinema World, to increase planting on both sides of John Fitch Highway, and we found similar reductions in the temperature. So next slide, please. So I think this is a point we wanted to kind of stop and ask questions, or ask if there are any questions.
Yeah, we're going to dive into some of the other kind of priorities, but before we move on from the technical pieces, is there anything that anyone wanted to more clarification on? Okay, not seeing anything in the chat or any hands raised, but feel free to raise your hand if you're wanting to ask a question at some point, or pop it in the chat. All right, let's keep moving.
All right. So after identifying all of these projects and, you know, understanding what the flood benefits are, we are kind of now in the process of moving on to next steps, which is how do we start to prioritize these projects in terms of what should be built and when, or what's worthy of kind of spending money to build. And so what we typically do in terms of identifying or prioritizing projects is we take that stormwater benefit ranking, we combine it kind of in terms of a weighted system with other co-benefits such as the heat reduction, as well as opportunities for pedestrian improvements, other nature-based solutions, you know, cost considerations, which could include operation and maintenance, near and long term, as well as kind of other co-benefits to communities. So these are just some of the criteria that we include, and we're going to be opening it up to get more feedback from you all in terms of what kind of criteria are we missing or what could be added. So next slide. And to give an example of what that kind of looks like, this is again kind of looking at the H&H modeling benefits of the proposed projects. We have again kind of identified what the ownership might be for those areas, what the type of green infrastructure, project it is. and also include kind of the percentage reduction or volume reduction, both for near and long term. For baseline now and 2070 is the long term. And then again, kind of showing the ranking. And then on the next slide, we combine that into this matrix that shows, this is an example from on the right from Waltham, but we take our ranking for H&H and we combine it into this scoring matrix with other kind of criteria. And so from there, we then would maybe start selecting, working with the community and city to kind of select the best types of projects to move forward with conceptual designs, which could range from zoomed out large scale kind of planning, or actually projects that move forward to construction or implementation. So I think
John,
that's next
we
slide.
have a couple questions come in now. So one question is, please explain how the volume reduction is calculated.
Yes, so it's based on the subbasins that have been delineated, which the subbasins are established by taking the digital elevation model that's provided kind of at the state level and combining that with the existing drainage system. So we understand basically where water moves over land before it goes into the drainage system or into the natural stream system. So we take those subbasins, which in this case, I think there were hundreds within our larger watershed. And then we take those, all of the projects are kind of designed within, one or potentially a number of those subbasins. And we can start to characterize basically the flood reduction in terms of how we start to remove rainfall that's kind of falling within that subbasin and being collected in these other areas, in these green infrastructure projects. So we can take, the conceptual, what you were seeing is the 2D plan, but all of those opportunities or projects that we identified also have kind of three-dimensional qualities to them. So if it's, we have kind of modeled storage capacity or depths to different projects if it's a sunken or floodable field. So all of those kind of go into the model, and we can show that as kind of a reduction from just the subbasin itself. And we do that instead of kind of modeling these small projects against the entire watershed, because it's really difficult to see 0.0001% improvements, from a street swale, on John Fitch Highway compared to the entire, northern half of the city. So we have to really kind of zoom in to these specific subbasins.
Yeah, and there's a follow-up question. I think that is the percent reduction for the entire subbasin or just the local area?
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. That's kind of for that local area. And these subbasins, they do represent, significant or larger areas. It's not that they're the size of a bus stop or something like that. So.
And so what you're saying is that they both add up together to be something significant, but the numbers we're showing are particularly for their kind of more local scale reductions in flooding.
Yeah, exactly.
And we have a question from Jim Lamp about the temperature. And so we're saying, in reducing the temperature, are we talking about the feel under a tree in the shade versus the actual temperature? Can we clarify that?
So I think we're talking about actual ambient air temperature. So it's not just
under a tree, right?
Not just under a tree. No, it's kind of the broader area. We do that. It's kind of modeled at a as we kind of see in that mapping, which is pixelated. Each pixel represents 10,000 square feet, and so when you do a 10% increase in canopy within 10,000 square feet, or 1,000 square feet of canopy, that's when you start to show 4 degrees change in terms of reduction for that pixel. So it's averaged, but experienced throughout.
Thanks, John. Okay, I got a couple more for you. We're interested in whether you've considered the impact of forest logging type operations that have been increasing within the city recently. Have those been incorporated into our model so far?
No, they haven't. And that would be interesting to kind of understand the impacts of those. We've, intentionally didn't work or propose stormwater projects further up in the watershed because it was so heavily forested, and there wouldn't have been a lot of benefits to cutting down forests to make room for stormwater management. But in terms of how that starts to impact urban heat island, that would be a great thing to study. Unfortunately, it's because that's a private industry, there's not a lot of great data unless you can get really recent aerial imagery.
Just pause in case anybody else on the panel wants to weigh in on any of those.
Hey, Joanna, this is Nick here. I did see a question pop up in Slido. Are there additional planning feasibility costs to the city for funding other than the remaining 75% design work Nick had mentioned? So I guess I'm assuming this question means, are there any funding sources available for kind of implementing some of these proposed designs? And I guess the answer is that under this grant program, we're trying to identify them, quantify the flood reduction benefits they provide, and begin conversations with some of the landowners that might own property where some of these projects can be implemented. I think funding for actual construction of these things would be a perfect application of a future MVP action grant. So we don't have anything currently set aside, but it's something that we'll consider during our applications for the next round of MVP action grant funding once this project is wrapped up.
Great, thanks. Great questions. Keep them coming. We want to hear them, so don't hesitate. So I'm going to give everyone a chance to kind of get involved in this a little bit more now. So I would love for you to think about the areas we've been discussing and where you have seen flooding occur. Properties that get flooded often, roads that have a few inches of water when it rains, sidewalks that are tough to get through during a storm. We're going to actually go to an online tool that allows us to kind of zoom in and out so that you can see where we've already gotten reports of flooding from residents. And then we want to hear your thoughts on whether we've captured it or any other details you want to add. So let me just pull this up.
Joanna, there was one more question. Did you want to go to that now, or do you want to hold off until after?
Oh, let's see. Yeah, let's. You want to read it off for us?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep. So it says, based on forest cutting plans that the Conservation Commission has seen, there are nearly a square mile of forest lands in the city that have been recently logged or is about to be logged within Fitchburg, which is around 5% of our entire city's forested land. This will increase runoff and exacerbate flooding.
Oh. More of a comment than a question. Yep, so that's great. That's good info. Thanks, Ralph. Glad you're here to share that with us. All right.
Yeah, and also important where you're something like that is increasing flooding, that doing some downstream flood mitigation is even more helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So, and actually, one way to look at that too would be, we're going to see more flooding in the future. So as we're modeling future storms, we're trying to increase kind of the treatment and capacity for those future storms. But if, the flooding increases in the short run for other reasons than climate change, that'll also be addressed by similar solutions. So you should be able to see now the map and some red dots on it. And these are the locations that we've heard from residents so far that are key areas of concern and flooding issues. You can see there's a bunch along John Fitch Highway, starting from down at Summer Street and up by Lunenburg and up through, we can zoom in here. up to Pearl Hill Road. And then there's another couple up here in the Stony Brook Road neighborhood and by the Fitchburg High School that have been noted. So the first question for you all is, are there other locations where you have experienced flooding that aren't represented by what's on this map? I want to make sure we haven't missed anything. And then the next question is going to be, are there particular ways that this has, impacted you? What have you seen? How has this played out? How often does this happen? So love to hear any additional thoughts you have. If you want to raise your hand, we'll unmute you, or you can pop it into the chat or the questions.
Hey, Joanna, this is Nick here. I'll kick it off. We've seen some flooding over on Billings Road, which is up just past the city's high school near Arnhow Farm Road. So if you go up Ashby State Road, take a left onto Arnhow, and then right there to the
Billings.
So there's an enormous amount of water that comes down Billings Road. It's kind of low-lying in between Billings and Arnhow Farm, and we've had some flooding of private property there due to road runoff and whatnot.
Would that be like right here, you think? Looks like terrain-wise,
exactly.
Coming right through there. Okay, good. That's helpful.
Yep.
And is it sort of standing water for a couple days, or how much? How long does it last?
There's a couple properties that receive direct runoff from the stormwater system on the road, and it's standing water that lasts for days and weeks on end until we get to the middle of July and August when it starts to dry out a little bit. Same for the properties right at the V in between Billings and Arnhow. There's a low-lying area there and a lot of standing water right in between properties, kind of probably the direct result of some of the private property development there, but nonetheless, standing water issues, very wet, a lot of water coming down the roadway.
Okay, great. I mean, not great, but good to know. Are there additions or details to add? I think we have all learned that John Fitch Highway is a key spot for flooding, as we've discussed. And then there's a few other points just north of that section that we looked at before that have also turned out to be kind of key hotspots for flooding. And obviously part of why we were looking at Coolidge Park in particular. Okay, well, if anybody has other comments, I've got a hand raised, don't I? Let's see. Okay, Christine, let me unmute you. Christine, if you want to unmute, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Great. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I just wanted to add that High Rock Road, which is, of course, in a northern and very rural part of the city, and is naturally a very rocky, challenging road, did have a lot of flooding, particularly the late winter this year. I don't know specifically whether it's related to Baker Brook or not, or the watershed, but it did have a huge amount of flooding, which led to an ice covering that was probably up to a foot deep at some points in time. The road was nearly impassable. And so if that was caused by that same watershed, I would say that's another place that there's an effect going on.
We all took a quick trip to the Bahamas there. I don't know if you saw that, but unfortunately, that's not what we're talking about. So is this it, right above Fisher Road, this area?
Yes, starting at that juncture of Fisher Road and going northward.
Okay, that's helpful. Any other questions from our team about details on that? Thanks, Christine. Okay, super.
This is Nick here again. This past winter, we did have a few areas similar to what Christine just described, where we had a lot of groundwater breakout or snow melts, so on and so forth. that caused icing issues. One area was actually just downhill from where Christine described, on Fisher Road, right where it takes that kind of dogleg right and goes across the outlet from Greens Pond. So a little further down Fisher, right at the intersection of High Rock, take that left and go south on Fisher.
Go this way, down here.
There. Yep, right down where Fisher takes that dogleg left and goes over that stream channel right there. We had a lot of ice build up. That's a steep hill, and actually just on the top of that hill, there was a solar farm put in, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. So there was a lot of clear cutting that was done there. I think it was an apple orchard before that. So a lot of trees were removed. The surface was turned into partially impervious, partially graveled road, so increased runoff, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's a key one. Actually, that's probably a good segue. So let's go back to our next step, which is we wanted to get you all to give us some input on which of these projects, and I'm just going to show them here without the solutions on them, but which of the potential project areas that we're talking about, which locations are you most interested in seeing the city move forward on flood reduction and resilience solutions? And so you should be able to pop into the Slido if you're not there yet, get there now. And this is your chance to kind of let us know which of these are the top priority to you. And the one we were just talking about is that, let's see, is that the John Fisher team? You'll have to help me out. The one where Fisher comes down.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Right near there. Exactly.
All right. So we got one vote in so far, and we're going to do an exercise to dig in a little deeper on a couple of these to look at the space. And so based on that, please give us your thoughts. And we have a comment or sort of a comment from Mark, etc., about the 6-acre swamp on the property that we just referred to on Billings Road. I assume that's an all the time swamp.
Yeah, I think it is, Joanna. There's a swamp and a stream that kind of runs through it, comes out the other side.
Okay.
That's where a lot of that Billings Road runoff ends up.
Great. Okay, so looks like we have some top ones to work on real quick. We'll do Coolidge Park, Wallace, Pearl Street, and if we have time, the Mass 2A block. So what we're going to do is I've got up here, we'll focus on the one on the left, the Coolidge Park. What I'd really like to hear from folks is, how do you use this space? Where do you walk? Where do you drive? Where do you gather, play sports? And where have you seen the flooding or felt the heat in this location specifically? And we have the option for you to help annotate, or you can just let us know and I will draw here for you based on what I hear. So how is the space being used? Is there anybody on this call that has sort of familiarity and wants to give us some comments on, as we're thinking about laying out solutions on the site, where they could go? This is where if we were in person, we'd all be standing around a map, but unfortunately, we can't do that.
We got one. Someone said, one of my children played soccer on the north side of the field. It is open and incredibly hot during summer months.
Ah, okay. We'll do a little.
We also have a hand raised that I can unmute.
Oops. Trying to get my pen
Okay.
here. Let's see. There we go.
Kim, I am going to unmute you.
Hello. So it gets really hot near the playground area, right near where the dog park is. I think that's because there's sidewalk there too, before it gets to the dirt road of where people walk the track.
Is that down here?
Yep.
Yeah.
It would be right see where that triangle is? It's right above there.
Okay. And this side?
Yep, there you go.
Okay, so that's a key. I'm using red for heat spots because that feels like an obvious symbology.
But an interesting too is because there's a lot of tree covering, but right where the soccer field is, right in that area, there's a lot of brush. That area that's actually a nice cool spot. So I don't know if you want to put that in a different color, but
yeah. Give that a little green. Is that just?
I live right across the street, so I'm pretty familiar with Coolidge Park.
Awesome. I lost my little guy. Okay, so is it around the?
So it's right around where the water is, around that last corner, going towards the Civic Center.
Oops, I lost my cursor here, guys. Sorry.
Go up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Up a little bit, and now to the left. Right, exactly, right there.
Yeah. And so, is there an area where we'd like to see more trees in the park?
Well, so you have the dog park, and then you have and I don't think there's a lot of shading, if I remember correctly, around the, they don't have a lot of shading around the playground. And I think it's because they have a pool there too. So they don't want, I would hope that they wouldn't want, they want the pool area to be warm. So, but there is a space where you could kind of differentiate the playground from the dog park that could give a little bit more shading.
And go ahead, sorry.
And also, they took a lot of trees down too near where they play hockey as well. So, and where there's playing sports and stuff, it's always nice to be kind of cool when you're running around, but.
That's great. I was just going to say, I'm not going to get all of this on the map, but I'm going to note it because our team's taking notes and we'll capture some of the detail you're saying separately. But that's great. Thank you so much for that. Any other comments on Coolidge Park?
There was one in the Slido poll
from
Ralph saying that he mainly uses the park by walking around the trail loop.
And is that just this? Is this path representing the trail loop?
Yeah.
All right.
There are two other comments now. One is that it seems that most of Coolidge Park is used recreationally and that the deck hockey rink gets quite hot in the summer.
Yeah, that's where they took all the trees down.
I see Christine Tree has her hand raised as well. Lindsay, I don't know if you can unmute her.
Yep, Christine, I'm going to unmute you right now. Actually, I think you might just be able to unmute yourself.
All right, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Great. So the flooding on the track that encircles Coolidge Park is a serious issue. And it's experienced on the left-hand side, really going from top to bottom, and then very seriously off the map down at the bottom corner. I know that there are a couple of storm drains down there, but they still flood. They seriously flood so that it is really not walkable. So anything that can be done to reduce that flooding, is wonderful. I'll say that I really enjoy the large mature trees that are up the right-hand side of the walk. I would love to see that instituted on the other side as well, as long as it doesn't interfere with the activities that are going on there. But I think there's plenty of space.
When you say the other side, do you mean over here?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I will further say, I remember before the swimming pool went in, which was a long time ago, when I was a child, they would dam the river on the right-hand side, and it was a swimming area. I don't know that damming the river is something that you want to do again, and we have the pool. But it certainly seems like a good area and opportunity to direct some runoff and have kind of a wetlands environment over there, since it was used for that purpose before.
And, you know, Lindsay touched on some of the stream walk that we did. I believe we're thinking about some of those stream solutions as well. Team, you can clarify.
Yep, yeah, that's correct. And I actually, when we walked along this section, I found the old dam. So it was kind of interesting seeing that there next to a dog park and trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, it used to be a child-oriented park, and the track that went around had little stations where you could go around, you'd stop and do exercises, and you could perform. You know, it was for the purposes of an exercise circuit. And I think I appreciate the use of the dog park there at this point in time, but I do think a more people-oriented park is probably a better use of the area.
Great, thanks everyone. This has been super helpful. I'm going to say we move on to another site, and one of the other ones that was top billing. Let's see what comes up next here. We've got so actually both of these, the Pearl Street location and the Wallace Civic Center. So same questions, you know, how do you use the space? Do you walk through here? Do you drive through here? Do you gather here? And are there particular places where you've really experienced issues with flooding and heat that you want us to be aware of?
So this is Nick here with the Pearl Street one. I think it might have been Kim or Christine who suggested, you know, further down the walking path, kind of off the screen, was an area that could use some trees. And I think that this corner is that area that one of them was describing. So I think there's a few ball fields a little further up John Fitch Highway, but there is some opportunity for tree planting here for sure.
Great.
And Kim has her hand up, so Kim, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi again. Okay, so it's right where it's right across the street too, at that cross patch. I wish I was there. I wish so I could point to it.
We can give you, you can draw. So hold on one second. Prepare yourself.
Okay.
Team, can we make her?
I'm on an iPad too, so just bear with me.
Oh, it's not doing what I was hoping it was going to do. Okay, so talk me through, are we going left or down or right?
Go up. Go now go down. Mm-hmm. Right at that crosshatch, or the four-way stop there.
Okay.
Right there. That's what that is, right? Go down a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Down more.
Okay.
Those are condos, so keep going down. Okay, now go to the right just a hair. Right there. That's where it floods.
Got it. Across the street from where we were just talking about, this area. Okay. So that's flooding, you said.
Mm-hmm. And I know we're not talking about roads, but it is, you can tell by the structure of the road as well that it's like it needs to be built up a little bit, I think. But you guys are the experts on that, but that's where it does flood.
Well, any other enhancements you can think of for this area? You know, I mean, if we're going to get in there and do stuff, we might as well be creative about what else is needed.
Honestly, because it is a kind of a walkway to Coolidge Park, I like Christine's idea though too to add more greenery towards the opening of Coolidge, but it would be kind of cool to kind of make that area a little bit more presentable as far as, and also environmentally friendly too. I know that they did try, because they have they do actually have a nice little sign there, I think, for Hollis Hill and stuff, but just to build up that area just a little bit to enhance it, I think will help with some of the issues that we are seeing.
Awesome. And I see this note that about the Coolidge, just to make sure I understand this. So I see a note, it does get littered in that area where we are discussing, and it would be cool to add some water.
Yeah, because we do end up cleaning every April around that area, and it's gross. It's like it could use some enhancement as far as, so to keep the litter away, but to also help the environment. And actually, by adding more water, I think will kind of alleviate some of that trash too, because, you know, people don't want to fall into the water, you know. So, but it would be kind of I think that would be a potential drain off too, because I think too there's a bridge right there as well in that area for an underpass. But I like that idea, Christine, about that area. I think that's a good, with the dam and everything, I think there would be availability for a runoff in case, you know, the water needed to go somewhere.
Great, thanks, Kim.
And we have a note from Ralph that says, I learned while we were writing the Fitchburg Trails vision plan that the southwest corner of Coolidge was formerly a landfill. And Ralph also has his hand up, so I'm just gonna unmute him if you have anything to add.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I believe that's why the road is always so bumpy. Ridge Road, right as you're going right through there. I think it's because it's not based on a good sub base, and the landfill material must be subsiding. But I really would support the idea of putting more trees in around that portion of the walking trail, which is probably the most used walking trail in the city by sheer numbers of users. So it certainly deserves attention.
Thanks, Ralph.
Sure.
Okay, and then we have at the intersection of John Pitch and Pearl Hill, Putts Pond floods the intersection. So that is, let's see if we can get to that. Bear with me one second.
While Joanna is doing that, just to add a comment about the intersection that Christine's talking about. We were just recently given funding through the American Rescue Plan Act to redesign that intersection adjacent to Putts Pond and implement some sort of green infrastructure, stormwater improvements, along with reconfiguration of the traffic and pedestrian access portion of the intersection itself. So that's something we're going to continue with over the next year or so, and I'm sure along the course of that, or through the course of that project, we'll be looking for some public input as well. So stay tuned for that.
Team, is that one of our 10 locations right now? John Pitch and Pearl Hill.
Joanna, it's on the Wallace Civic Center slide.
Oh, it was. Okay. We were so close.
It's that pond at the top.
Oh, of course. Okay, great. Thank you.
And we also have one more hand raised, I think. Martha, I'm going to unmute you.
Thank you. You can hear me?
Yes.
So I'm happy to hear about the Putts Pond intersection. I think that would be a great place to do some enhancements. And I would just think Putts Pond is an opportunity for storage of floodwaters, right? So I was wondering about, and maybe we're not talking about this, but just south and east of there, you know, heading towards the Civic Center, the parking lot for the university. All along there, it's eroding very badly into the brook. The trees are falling in and eroding in it and cutting into the parking lot. And I just don't know if there's anything that's planned for that area. There's for pervious pavers. The city and the university in the past has been open to potentially doing something there.
Is that location visible on here?
Yes.
So,
sorry, continue.
No, go ahead. You tell.
I was gonna say, I think that area is that's the Civic Center parking lots, right? Which is kind of where those, yeah, right in there.
Mm-hmm.
Just north of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right where your cursor is, and a little bit farther up. But that parking lot is owned by or used by the university. You know, they have a bus stop there and have the buses come down. The kids, students park there. And it's just been an issue for quite a while. And I was always hoping to see some pervious pavement going in there.
Excellent.
Yeah, that was one of the areas that we did note during the stream walk, just all of the erosion along there. So it's definitely a potential spot that we're looking at.
I'm using purple for erosion.
Now, are you working with?
Go ahead.
Are you working with the university at all? Have you talked to them?
We've done some outreach to them, Nick. I don't know if we've had any specific conversations yet. That is part of the sort of next step. Can you say any more about that, Nick? Do you have any other information that I don't have?
Yeah, a little bit. So that was an area that was targeted a number of years ago. Actually, before I came to the city back in 2012, the EPA issued the city a consent decree for its sanitary sewer system and the discharges to the Nashua River. And one of the requirements of that consent decree was a supplemental environmental project. And we evaluated a number of sites to include as that supplemental environmental project, and this was one of them. We ended up doing some work a little further down Baker Brook in the park itself, just because it more directly benefited the city versus the university. But this is an area that's been kind of an outstanding issue for a number of years, and I'm glad you brought it up, Martha, because it is heavily used by the college. It directly serves the city. There's a path that cuts through from John Fitch Highway over to a recreational facility used by the college. And we've actually started discussions about maybe constructing a second city-owned disc golf course along the back side of Coolidge Park, kind of on the other side of Baker Brook there. So kind of right in this area, right where we would plan to access that disc golf course area. So I think it would be a great partnership between the city and the university to get something done here.
Right. So I work for the Nashua River Watershed Association, and several years ago met with Jay Bly, who's the vice president of the university, or was. I don't know if he still is, and somebody who is doing a lot of stormwater controls in Leominster, and he was very interested in a 319 project for that particular spot. The timing wasn't quite right for the university, but they were doing a lot of stormwater improvements. So that was something that, oh yeah, okay, they understood that there was an issue there, and so, but the problem is that they would lose parking spots. So that's the issue.
And we've got a couple comments we'll incorporate about the section of John Fitch Highway between Pearl and Townsend flooding badly. Any last questions from our team that you wanted? Any clarifications on the sites we've talked about? Good. Great. This has been super helpful. Thank you, everyone, for jumping in with us, and please keep the comments coming. So there's a comment form on the webpage. You have contact information for the project for Nick. Please let us know as you have other thoughts and comments. We're going to keep working on this and developing this over time. So it's not the end of the story. I do see a question. Let's see. Sorry, I just want to make sure we've cleared the decks here.
There is one question that I don't think we've got.
Okay, what's that one?
There's another one. So we have one from Keith that says, do you have recommendations for controlling the impact of future development through changes in Fitchburg's correct zoning and other controls / regulations?
Well, that's not part
So
of.
we don't have.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
We don't have Tom Skorowski here tonight, who's our Executive Director of Community Development Planning, but I know that him and his department are undergoing kind of a zoning rewrite that's been happening for the past year or so. And I think, some of this, limiting development and requiring some more stringent erosion controls, sediment controls, runoff controls, et cetera, is included in that zoning update. On the DPW side, we've recently kind of reconfigured our stormwater management regulations to satisfy the EPA's requirements for our municipal separate storm sewer system program, which is the program that EPA uses to kind of regulate the stormwater discharges from our stormwater system. So those have been updated to implement better construction period erosion and sediment controls, improved stormwater controls for new developments, redevelopments, and a lot of stuff geared towards helping to make sure that we are looking at flooding and issues when we're talking about new development or redevelopment. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great. And we're going to have one of the last comments here will be, it looks like from Ralph, about the MA2A block.
Well, I'm not sure it's actually the MA2A block, but I thought a very deserving focus of attention would be the area in front of Cinema World, where there's that huge underused parking lot, which used to be the path of the Brook before it was rerouted around the back of there. And it seems like if the property owner would be amenable and the state would be willing to help fund it, it would be wonderful to put a wetland right across that parking lot that the stream could flow through and flood into a little bit, with a couple of small bridges so people can access the stores and the cinema behind it. So I don't know whether that's still something that you would consider, or whether the landowner would consider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Great comment. All right, well, we're going to let you guys go off to your evening shortly, and I'm going to hand it off to Nick to take us home here.
All right, thanks, Joanna. So I just wanted to kind of go over some of the next steps here for this project. We're going to take the potential sites that Weston & Sampson's identified through their modeling and field investigations and so forth, and start to prioritize them and further evaluate their viability, both in terms of reducing flood elevations, construction viability, potential funding sources, costs, all that good stuff. We're going to refine some of the conceptual designs that we've discussed here tonight for these potential sites, and kind of hone in on some very site-specific stuff. And then we're going to begin discussion with some of the landowners that are affected by this analysis, sites that we've identified as potential sites for flood reduction measures. But I do want to emphasize that there's both city and privately owned sites that we've identified here tonight. These potential sites are completely conceptual in nature. We're not looking to force any landowners to do anything against their will, and we're really only looking to advance those private property-focused projects if landowners are interested. So we don't want to make anyone feel that the city's going to force them to do anything they don't want to do. But we would stress that any interested landowners that like what they hear tonight, contact the city, either myself or Tom Skorowski in Community Development Planning, and we can start these conversations about how best to maybe implement some of these flood reduction measures on those private properties. In the future, as I mentioned earlier, there may be resources available for these private property owners to implement some of these stormwater and flood reduction measures, whether it's through MVP Action Grant funding or future just city budgets. So with that, I guess I'll ask if anyone has any final questions. And I'd like to thank the Weston & Sampson team for hosting this presentation for us tonight. Our contact information is up on the screen here. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us.
And if you're not already on the email list, if you didn't get an email from us about this event, but you would like to be, you can shoot us a private chat or email us your contact information. We'll make sure and include you on future updates. I do see Martha's hand up, and I want to just double check, Martha, if that's leftover, or if you have a comment, you're welcome to jump in.
That's leftover.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. Well, thanks everyone for spending the evening with us, and we look forward to more wonderful improvements in the city of Fitchburg.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
I think that went really well. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your hard work.
Yeah, glad we had a good group. All right.
A
Take care.
participatory group too.
Right?
Yeah, that was good.
Yep.
I've saved the chat and the questions too.
Okay.
Okay.
I saved some notes from the interactive part as well, so I'll send
Great.
those to you.
Thanks.
Joanne.
Yeah, we can combine them with the screenshots and the quick little summary.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
All right.
Good
Great
night.
night.